What does 30 years of coyote hunting actually teach you about going home empty-handed? Most hunters do not want to hear the answer. The hunters who kill dogs consistently get skunked plenty. The system they run produces dogs on roughly 2/3 of their serious mornings. The other third makes the system better. That part is harder to put in a thumbnail. Let me deal with the title before we go anywhere else. 30 years and never empty-handed sounds great on a thumbnail. The real story is different. I have been skunked plenty of times in 30 years. I have sat in fields for an hour and watched nothing. I have driven 90 minutes to properties and walked back to the truck with cold coffee and a clean notebook. I have had mornings where the wind shifted 10 minutes after I sat down and burned the entire stand before I ever opened the e-collar. That is coyote hunting. The honest version of the title is this. Across 30 years, I have built a system that produces a dog on roughly 2/3 of the mornings I take seriously. The other third, I learned something I did not know yesterday. The framework I am walking through is what makes the 2/3 happen and what keeps the empty mornings from being wasted. Stay to the end. The bonus is the post-stand habit that quietly produces more kills than any call sequence I have ever run, and almost no other hunters do it. Most hunters get the kill rate wrong from the first decision. They think it is about the call, the Fox Pro that costs $400, the Convergent that costs $5, the mouth call rotation in the truck console, the optics, the rifle, the thermal optic, the heat-sensing scope that runs another $3,000 on top of everything else. The gear is real. The gear is not the answer. I have killed dogs with a $30 mouth call and a Marlin lever action my dad gave me in the 80s. I have been out-hunted by guys running $10,000 setups. The kill rate gap between us was not about the gear. The kill rate gap was about the system around the gear, the pre-stand work, the decision-making in the field, the honesty about what worked and what did not. The hunters who kill consistently work the system. The hunters who do not kill consistently keep upgrading the gear. That is the actual divide. There is a guy in my county who has been buying the newest Predator gear every season for 15 years now. ICO Tech to Fox Pro to Convergent, Vortex to Night Force to ATN Thermal. He spends maybe $4,000 a year cycling equipment, and his kill numbers have been flat the whole time. There is another guy 2 miles down the road who runs a Night and Hail mouth call from 1998 and a Bushnell scope from before that. And he kills more dogs in a month than the gear guy kills in a season. The difference is not the year of manufacture on either of their callers. The difference is, one of them works the system and the other works the catalog. The system has 5 elements: pre-stand intel, stand selection, call selection by season, time on stand, post-stand debrief. Each of these is the difference between a hunter who kills dogs every other Saturday morning and a hunter who fills the truck. None of them require a gear upgrade. All of them require discipline. The framework is what is coming up. The honesty about how often it still produces nothing is part of the framework. Pre-stand intel is element 1. The typical hunter checks the weather app for wind direction and temperature. He drives to a property he knows. He parks at the road. He walks in. He sits down. He calls. The pre-stand work is checking a phone app and pointing the truck the right way. My pre-stand work is different. The night before, I walk through the property on satellite imagery from OnX or Hunt Stand. I look at the cover layout, the food sources, the wind direction predicted for the morning, the moon phase, the temperature curve, the day's barometric pressure forecast, recent precipitation, and any reports of coyote activity my landowner has shared with me. I look at the property as a system, not as a single stand. By the time I leave the house, I have at least 3 potential setups marked on the map, and a primary plus a backup decision based on what the actual wind is doing when I get there. If I get to the property and the wind is wrong for setup A, I have setup B already located. The typical hunter shows up and adapts on the fly. I show up with the adaptations already made. This pre-stand work matters more in Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, open pasture, and Oak Ridge country than it does on flat ground. The terrain in that country forces dogs through specific corridors, and knowing those corridors before you sit down is the difference between a stand that produced and a stand that did not. Same applies to the woodlot edges I hunt in southern Pennsylvania, AG country, and the high desert pasture I have hunted on, trips out to Wyoming sagebrush country. Different terrain, same pre-stand framework. The framework travels, the terrain changes around it. You have had that morning. You drove to a property thinking you knew the wind, and the wind was not what the app said. You sat down anyway because you were already there. You had already invested the time, and turning around felt worse than sitting on the wrong wind. 3 hours later, you walked back to the truck, having taught the local dogs about your scent without ever seeing one. Most hunters have that morning a couple times a season. The fix is not better weather apps. The fix is the night before pre-scout that gives you setup B before you ever leave the house. A buddy of mine who runs predator control on roughly 4 ranches in West Texas brush country, the desert flats and cedar brake country south of Marfa, told me he tells all his contracted clients the same thing. 20 minutes of pre-scouting saves 3 hours of wrong stand. He is not wrong. The data backs him up. My notebook from last winter showed that the stands where I ran the full pre-scout produced visible dogs at roughly twice the rate of the stands where I just showed up. Stand selection is element 2. The typical hunter picks a stand based on what looks good when he gets there. My stand selection is a checklist. Wind angle relative to likely approach, sun angle for the time of day, cover behind me to break my silhouette, open ground in front for shooting, pinch points near the setup, the funnel coyote movement, high enough elevation to control the field of view, approach trail upwind of my actual sit position, distance from any roads or houses or regular human activity. The list is not complicated. The discipline is in actually checking every item before I sit down. Most hunters check 2 or 3 of the items on their property and call it good. The dogs that get away on those stands are the dogs that exploited the items the hunter skipped. The elevation rule is one I lean on hard. Even 10 extra feet of vertical height, the height of a small, low pickup truck stacked on its tires, changes how sound carries and how the field reads to a coyote moving through. Hay barn lofts, abandoned fire towers if they are still safe to climb, and the backside of any high spot at the property's highest accessible point all give you the elevation advantage. Coyotes look up less than they look across. The hunter sitting at 30 feet above the field, the height of a 3-story farmhouse, has a quiet visual advantage that no thermal optic and no scope upgrade can match. Quick aside on roads, most pressured dogs avoid sounds coming from within a quarter mile of regular vehicle traffic. Park your truck a half mile from your stand, more than 8 football fields away if you can. The walk-in is the price of being in the right place. The hunter who parks at the gate and sits 200 yards in is hunting the same ground every other guy in the county is hunting. I skipped the elevation item on a stand last December in southern Pennsylvania, AG country, and watched a dog work the downwind 150 yards out for 10 minutes without ever giving me a shot because the field rolled enough between us that I could see his ears and his back and nothing else. If I had been 10 feet higher, I would have had the whole shoulder line. I made that mistake in my 5th year of hunting, and I made it again in my 28th year because the system is only as good as the discipline behind it. Some stands you skip an item and pay for it. Call selection is element 3. The typical hunter runs prey distress year-round and wonders why his February kill rate drops. The system rotates calls by season because coyote drives change with the calendar. 3 call categories cover the year: prey distress for cottontail and jackrabbit and rodent sounds, coyote vocalizations for lone howl and challenge howl and pup distress, confidence calls for crow and magpie and other bird sounds that suggest a normal undisturbed environment. The matchup is what matters. In late winter, when food is scarce and the dogs are running on caloric deficit, the hunger-driven risk override kicks in. That is the technical name for it. Wildlife biologists who study predator behavior on prey-stressed populations document that coyotes will commit to distress calls in late winter, at distances and in daylight conditions they would not approach in fall. The cost-benefit calculation in the dog's head shifts. Calories outweigh caution. A wounded rabbit at noon in a February pasture is a meal that may decide whether he eats this week. He commits. In fall, when prey is plentiful, the same call gets ignored because the calculation is different. He has plenty to eat. The risk of approach is not worth it. So fall is when the coyote vocalizations carry the load. Lone howls and pup distress trigger pack social bonding and territorial drives instead of the food drive. In breeding season, the territorial calls outproduce everything. The system matches the call to the drive that is active that month. Most hunters never adjust. They run rabbit distress in February the same way they ran it in October, and the only thing that changed is their kill rate dropped. They blame the dogs for getting smarter. The dogs got hungrier and the wrong call stopped working. Quick note on regulations. State rules on electronic calls and night hunting vary widely. A few states restrict certain sound types or volumes during specific seasons. A 2-minute check on your state wildlife agency website before you head out keeps you legal. The system works the same with hand calls if your state restricts e-callers. The structure is about matching call to season, not about which sound source you use to play the call. Across maybe 150 stands in my notebook last winter, on the days I matched the call to the active drive, my visible dog rate ran around 2/3. On the days I ran the wrong call category, the rate fell to about 1/4, not a controlled study. But the pattern is consistent enough across 30 years that I trust it more than I trust any single morning's results. Everything in this video, plus 60 more field-tested techniques, is in the Coyote Hunter's Bible from Downwind Company. 229 pages of coyote behavior. Science, scent control, stand placement, calling sequences, breeding season tactics, and educated coyote techniques with a quick reference card you can take to the stand. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Time on stand is element 4. The typical hunter runs a 15-minute stand. He calls, watches, packs up, because nothing showed in 15 minutes, and drives to the next property. The 15-minute rule is the worst piece of advice in modern coyote calling. Coyotes take time to commit, especially pressured dogs who have heard hundreds of sequences in their lives. My system runs minimum 30 minutes per stand on a property I have scouted. 45 minutes if I get a vocal answer from a dog. A full hour if I have any visual contact at all. Even a glimpse of fur at 400 yards. The exception is unfamiliar properties I am running blind without intel, where 15 minutes confirms the dog density before I move on. Most stands worth my time get the full hour. The hunters who quit at 15 minutes leave dogs in the field that would have committed at minute 28. Some of those dogs were already moving toward the call. They just needed more time. You have had that stand. You sat for 15 minutes, packed up, walked back to the truck, and saw a coyote trot across the same field as you drove away. Every single hunter has had that morning. The dog was committing. The hunter ran out of patience. I lost a dog 3 winters ago in northern Maine boreal edge country, the mixed conifer ridge mix east of Bangor, because I packed up at 32 minutes when the property was telling me to stay. I drove a 1/4 mile down the road and saw the dog crossing the same field I had just left. He had been 10 minutes from being in my shooting lane. I left 10 minutes too soon. I would have killed him at minute 42 if I had stayed. That morning is in my notebook with a single underline. Stay longer when the property is telling you to stay. Most of us cannot read what the property is telling us until after we leave it. The system fixes that with the post-stand debrief, which is element 5 and what I am building toward. Stand time also varies by season. In late winter, when the hunger drive is high, dogs commit faster, and your minute 28 may be a minute 12 commit. In fall, when prey is plentiful, the same dog takes 45 minutes to decide. The stand time you run should match the season's response window. Most hunters run the same 15 minutes year-round and never figure out why their kill rate drops when the season changes. The dogs did not get smarter. The hunter ran out of patience faster than the dogs ran out of caution. There is one condition where my entire system breaks down. Midday and hot weather, specifically summer afternoons above 85 degrees with bright sun and dry conditions. Coyotes go almost completely inactive in those windows. They lay up in shade, conserve water, and do not move regardless of what you call. The hunger-driven biology that makes them commit in late winter does not apply because in midsummer, the prey base is also stressed and the dogs are getting plenty to eat through the cooler dawn and dusk hours. The midday hot stand produces nothing. I learned this the hard way running stands in southwestern Virginia. Summer afternoons 1 year out of stubbornness. 20 stands across June and July. 0 dogs. I had set up perfect terrain, the right calls, the right wind, and the dogs were not playing. The mistake was the time of day, not anything else I controlled. The fix is simple. Do not hunt midday in hot summer. Hunt the cool window before 9 in the morning and after 7 in the evening. The system applies to every other condition. Bluebird cold mornings produce. Light drizzle produces. The window after a hard freeze produces. Wind under 20 miles per hour produces. The single condition where you should close the truck door and go home is summer midday. There is no shame in not hunting that window. There is real cost in hunting it anyway. Educated dogs that hear your calls during a window where they were not going to commit get just slightly more conditioned to your specific sounds, which makes them harder to call when conditions are right. Skipping a stand when conditions are wrong protects your future stands when conditions are right. That is the math. Same math applies to the silent dogs nobody ever sees. A percentage of the coyotes on any property hear your call and choose not to come. They never vocalize. They never approach. The system does not turn those dogs into committed dogs. Nothing does. The system makes sure the dogs that were going to come anyway end up in your shooting lane instead of slipping past at 200 yards. Which brings me to element 5 and the bonus I told you about at the start. The post-stand debrief is what I have been building toward, and it is the part of the system that produces more dogs over a season than any call sequence I have ever run. I write down every stand, time, weather, wind direction, at sit down, and at leave time, sun angle, calls I ran, sequences I used in what order, what the dog did, what I think went wrong on the blank stands, what I think went right on the productive ones. 5 minutes of writing immediately after I leave the stand. Same kind of notebook for 30 years now. The notebook is not a memory aid. The notebook is the system's feedback loop. The reason my kill rate climbed across 30 years is that I am hunting the same dogs my dad and granddad hunted with data they did not have. I know that on a north wind in late January, the Shenandoah property produces dogs at minute 28 on average, not minute 15. I know that on a southwest wind on the same property, the dogs hang up at 200 yards, 2 football fields out, because the cover layout pushes them downwind of where I always used to set up. So I changed my setup on a southwest wind 2 seasons ago, and the kill rate on that property doubled. None of that information lives in my head. It all lives in the notebook. Most hunters do not keep one. They sit a stand, kill or not kill, drive home, and lose the data. 5 years later, they are still making the same small mistakes because they have nothing to look back on. A specific entry from my notebook last February reads like this: property name, wind northwest at 6, temperature 28, lone howl at sit down, no answer, soft cottontail at minute 12, visual on a single dog at minute 23, 450 yards out, more than 4 football fields end to end. Lost him in cover at minute 26. Re-engaged with pup distress at minute 30. Visual again at minute 38, 200 yards. Killed him at minute 41. Note at the bottom. The pup distress at minute 30 was what closed the deal. Without that, he would have hung up. The notebook entry is what tells me, when I am looking at the same conditions next February, that the pup distress at the right moment is the play. Without the entry, I might run the same cottontail twice and wonder why he hung up. Every stand makes the next stand smarter. That is what the notebook does. The empty stands count as much as the kill stands because the empty entries tell me what did not work in those conditions, which means I am not running the same approach on the same conditions next time and getting the same result. A buddy of mine who runs predator control on roughly 4 ranches in West Texas, brush country, the desert flats, and cedar break country south of Marfa, kept paper notebooks for decades and now runs the same data in a phone app. Same system, different format. He kills more dogs per contracted acre than any other hunter on those properties because he hunts the data, not the hope. His notebook tells him which corner of which pasture produces on which wind in which month. The dogs do not know they are being patterned across years. They just know that somehow the guy who shows up keeps killing them, while the other contractor who tries to take over a section never matches the numbers. The notebook is the answer. My wife thinks the notebook is the strangest part of the obsession. She accepted the rifle cleaning kit on the kitchen table years ago. The notebook on the nightstand was the line that took some explaining. I told her the notebook is what makes the rifle worth using. She said the rifle is what makes the notebook worth keeping. I will give her that one. The notebook is also why 30 years of hunting becomes 30 years of compounding learning instead of the same season hunted 30 different times. That is the entire transformation in one sentence. Most hunters work hard for 30 years and learn the same lesson over and over. The hunters who kill consistently work the system, capture the data, and learn a different lesson every year. The notebook is what makes the system possible. The system is what makes the consistency possible. The consistency is what looks like never going home empty-handed, except for the part where you go home empty-handed plenty, and the notebook tells you why and helps you not do it again. Think about the math. A hunter who runs 40 stands a season for 30 years, runs 1,200 stands. Without a notebook, those 1,200 stands collapse into a fuzzy memory of mostly forgotten mornings. With a notebook, they become 1,200 data points across decades of conditions, properties, calls, and weather windows. The data points compound. The hunter without the notebook hunts the same season 30 times. The hunter with the notebook hunts 30 different seasons of accumulating knowledge. By year 15, the gap between the two hunters is the kill rate gap nobody can explain by gear alone. The notebook is the explanation. Try this on your next stand. Pick one piece of the system. Maybe the pre-stand work where you pre-scout the property the night before, instead of showing up cold. Maybe the stand selection checklist where you actually verify every item before you sit down. Maybe the notebook habit. Pick one piece, run it for a season, watch what changes, the system compounds, one piece at a time. The hunters who kill dogs consistently across 30 years are the hunters who got disciplined about one piece at a time over many seasons until the whole framework was running. The empty-handed mornings are still part of the deal. The system is what makes them rare. This is Dead Wind Company.